last time I gave a talk, I just gave it as a recording. And since the subject of grace, divine grace, had been brought up last Friday when Swami Purnananda was here and gave a talk, I thought I would elaborate on that. And so we had a talk, but I don't think I concluded it. And I may repeat much from part one, never mind. There's no harm in repeating things. So when we talk of grace, or any subject for that matter, we have to see if we can define some terms. And grace can be a theological term. Western Christianity, for example, or Western culture would have its understanding of grace. Christian grace is to do with the salvific value of Christ and so on. But what we mean by grace is something like a broadcast. Let us take the local broadcasting station broadcasting over a certain wave band, wavelength. A certain frequency is given, and the frequency and the wave band enable us to make a tuning, but we have to have the resolve to do it. And the resolve to do what? To use an instrument. So in the Sankhya way of thinking about things like the mind and so on, we don't use these terms of mind. There's a much more telling term that is antakarana. It means internal instrument. For convenience, we can divide things into internal, external. We can say that the body is external. We can even say that beyond the body is external. And from the human point of view, 5 objects are being registered because we only have 5 photographs of the whole of our experience of the whole universe. And so there has to be 5 registration points, sense organs, that catch this external thing. They happen to be posted on the outmost part of the skin. And we know that every cell of the body has a membrane, or every cell for that matter has a membrane. And we also know that all the sensations beyond that membrane in the environment are introduced selectively into the membrane and finally into the nucleus of a cell. And you may think that's a simple thing, but actually, if you were to take the message that has to happen from the membrane to the nucleus of the cell, where the DNA sits and all that, then it's equivalent to a travel from Edinburgh to London, that distance. And it happens in a transporting way and happens extremely rapidly. These are the discoveries of physiology today. So now we have to find out, how does that happen? And we are really faced with 2 broad choices. One choice is non-explanatory. It says it just happens. It's just like that. Capital C, by chance. The other point of view might be phrased as capital G, by God. But then that's open to various disagreements, because then you have to say, well, what is this God? Is it some being above the crowd, outside our circle of experience? We keep that person in a deposit box somewhere, bring him in on a Sunday, or whenever we have a problem, into our circle of experience. But you see, that extra cosmic God is not a bad starting point, but you can see if it's outside, what use is that? And so every person who has thought about these questions in a deeper way will bring this entity inside the circle. According to Swami Vivekananda, if you want a definition for this being that we can label Ishvara, implying some being that is responsible for regularity, harmony, and rhythm, making sure things don't crash into each other, keeping the laws going. And the difficulty you see is if you retain the laws as constants or parameters and say they're immutable, they were always there, eternally there, is a kind of polytheism. Because instead of having one single God, you have a number of entities which are eternal, which are immutable, and responsible as causation factors for everything else. What is the difference between that and gods? So from the 17th century or so onwards, the idea really, and we were mentioning Descartes and how he brought a bifurcated system in, that we have followed since, or modern science has followed since, and is naturally materialistic. Because it brings everything down to a reductionist atomic structural thing. That means everything, every phenomena has to be explained in that way. There can be no other way of thinking, and it is inherently quantitative, leaving out any sense of quality. The late scientist and philosopher Wolfgang Smith, I only came across him fairly recently from the personality development workshop that we do. And somebody lent me a book. I'd heard of the name, but didn't really study it very well. And the book was entitled Vedanta in the Light of Christianity. So anyway, his word for our experiential world that is dictated by the senses and their responses. Responses meaning there are 5 responses also. 5 organs of information, 5 organs of response, and every cell has that pattern of behavior. An input, an analysis, a kind of manufacturing process, and a response. So we're following the same pattern, it's only we're cooperative cells physically. But he calls that world the corporeal world. And that brings in not only the qualitative, but the quantitative, both together. And he brings in the tripartite world. The tripartite world was the standard way of viewing things up to the 17th century. And so Plato and the atomic theorist Democritus, they disagreed. And Plato had this tripartite world. Vedanta also has this tripartite world. Is it theoretical? Well, the only theoretical part is that what we experience here can be extrapolated to the overall, the totality. In other words, we're a kind of miniature cosmos, and the rest of the universe is on the same pattern. And Einstein would have understood this to some extent because what he took as special relativity in a vacuum and so on, he generalized and extrapolated that to general relativity, applied the same principles to the whole of the universe, and experimentation, observation has shown him to be correct. Curvature of space and time is an acknowledged thing. So all we have to do is analyze our own self. Once we analyze ourselves, it's like if you want to know if rice has been cooked, you don't have to eat every grain of rice. You simply take a small sample, you eat that, and it tells us about the cooked condition of the whole thing. So the ancient sages, way back, who put in this philosophical section in the Vedas called Upanishads, which is also called Vedanta, they weren't interested in standing still and asking the question, I am here, where is God? They stood there and said, I am here, what is that? Only taking one thing for granted, I exist. If I exist, the next question is, but what is this? And making a careful analysis of anything which is changing. So the technical term for the universe was Jagat, the thing that changes. So when we use a criteria, which is something that is existent, must be something that cannot change. Otherwise, it exists and it doesn't exist. It's like asking, does my car indicator work? Yes, no, yes, no. It appears, it disappears. So something which is existent, the criteria is it has to be unchanging. Now, that's a difficult thing in a sense because it's okay theoretically, you can work it out, you can analyze it nicely and dismiss anything that is in the realm of change. But with that, you're also dismissing time, because time is the framework in which we notice change. And if you remove that and say that something that is unchanging is also something that is beyond time, also beyond space, then you have the problem that anything which is absolute, absolutely real and fixed and unchanging is inherently abstract. So how do we deal with the abstract? We first of all understand there's a principle of unchanging, and then we learn to catch the emotions up, the senses up, the experiences up, until we are able to endorse it as an absolute fact of qualitative experience, our own experience about it, both empirical as well as rational, both. And the last part is the most difficult. Like anything else, it takes practice. Now, what has this got to do with divine grace? Divine grace can be considered to be something like a flow, a constant flow. And I mentioned something like the broadcast waves coming from, say, OTE. We don't have to go to the broadcasting station to get it. If we have the intention, the resolve, that we will tune into a certain frequency, a certain wave band, then all we require is an instrument to do it. And this instrument is called antakarana, an internal instrument. And the tuning part of it is called attention, what might also be called, in a sense, cognition. So that tuning mechanism can be under our control because we can observe when we are attentive and when we are not. And we're all pretty inherently skilled at shifting our attention, probably stimulated by an external noise or something external to the sense. Something suddenly happens, like, for example, if there's a sudden bang outside the property here, then we may all rush to the window. Immediately, what became of the talk? So we have the capacity to shift our attention almost instantaneously, but of course it may only be for a second, a few seconds. But if it can happen in a few seconds, it can happen in a few minutes, it can happen in a few hours. The difficulty is, can it be sustained for 6 months at a time? And so it requires us taking a step toward a step-by-step approach. Something like, if you want to travel from Dublin to Athlone, let's say, for those of you who are not coming from Ireland, so let us say a journey of maybe 150, 200 kilometers, and we're traveling at night, we're not equipped with a big lamp that lights the whole way. We're only given something that lights up maybe 20 meters. And once we come to the end of the 20 minutes, another 20 minutes is lit up for us. Now, do we have any example of shifting our attention? And I mentioned in the first part, I can mention it again. Yes, the way that a fuel injection motor car works is that it has, let's say, 4 pistons. And these pistons are attached to a camshaft. That means they rotate in an irregular way. Instead of all rotating at the same time, they're timed to rotate, let us say, 4 cylinders, 1, 2, 3, 4, or not 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 3, 2, 4, something like that. And the reason why they're able to go up and down as pistons This is a very sensitive finger, an electrical apparatus, a distributor under a distributor cap. And when fuel comes to the head of the piston, the mechanism is designed to select, if you will, each piston. A sensory instrument like that. So we have something called attention, something like an instrument, which is a probe, designed to alight on any particular subject. And by will we can do it, but if we're really interested, it happens by itself. Our attention is drawn to that. So this example of selectively being able to steer our attention in a certain way, we all experience it. We all understand it. Now the problem is, if there is no systematic direction in it, it brings in a lot of impressions which have really an effect of creating the opposite of what we really want. Lack of concentration, what we may call a scattered mind or scattered attention. And so the key really is in concentration, and by concentration we mean voluntarily taking this particular instrument and deliberately steering it, allowing it to settle on a subject which gives us an element of peace, joy, all the things that we're looking for. And doing it systematically and doing it repeatedly until it becomes habitual. And we have a wonderful facility called time to do it. Because you see, supposing theoretically the instrument is there, the object is there, go back to the example, excuse me, of a transistor. We should be able to pick up all the waves. The waves being there in the electromagnetic field, they're not there in a location. They're right here where we stand, and we can tune into it at any moment in time. And it would be a useless thing to say, when my transistor breaks down, what happens to the broadcast? Nothing. The broadcast is already there. It's already there. It doesn't die out. The fact that this small instrumentation maybe goes off. Now, when it goes off, using that same example, we get howling noises. We get a disturbance and we say, my life is disturbed, unhappy, or momentary glimpses of happiness and so on. And in Buddhism, this is really identified in a medical way. I mentioned on one of the WhatsApp groups, I do know where it is. You see, this term, nirvana, is seen as a Buddhist term, but it's not. Bhagavad Gita in the 5th chapter mentions this term, Brahma Nirvana, 3 times. But what is this Brahman? This Brahman is this thing that has no moving parts in space and no evolution in time. So how do we get to grips with this? And Buddha, being so compassionate, wanted the ordinary people in an uncomplicated way to take a certain medical remedy for sufferings without the complicated, abstract, metaphysical complication of Brahman. So he takes the term Brahman away and sticks with Nirvana and tells us, look, I'm your doctor. I know you are suffering. I feel your suffering. I'm compassionate. Compassionate means I too have suffered. We can recall in the Buddha's life how he was in an emaciated position and felt this is not giving me any enlightenment. So it was suggested, no, you take a little food, sit here, and with great resolve he sat. Now, if we want anything in life, first thing is we have to have resolve, an intention. When we do a puja here or anywhere, the first thing that we do is we understand what is it for, what is our intention, make a resolve. So a resolution has to be made. We resolve that we will use our instrument, our tuning mechanism, and we resolve that we will tune it to exact wavelength that we want. And whenever it wanders off, we want to put it back again. Technically, this technique is called Abhyasa Yoga. That is, and you see, it can also be called mindfulness. In Buddhism, they may have that term, but here we call it smarta. That is remembrance, bringing our attention back. Whenever it wanders off, hey, come on, come back. Like taking a dog for a walk. It goes off, you let it off the leash, it goes off here and there, sniffing. But then you have to whistle and bring it back. A well-trained dog will come back. An untrained dog will say, excuse me, I'm happy doing my sniffing thing. So to recall the mind back in a repetitive movement, which is not a struggle. In other words, it is not in itself negative. It's not an unpleasant task. We take it like a kind of game, taking the attention back, lovingly doing it, patiently doing it, until it becomes not only our second nature, but our first nature too. We no longer then have to continuously bring it back. Automatically it's going there. And we require time to do it, because if the instrument is there, if the resolve is there, let's take, for example, songs. A person may know, let's say, 100 songs. All right, please sing them all at once. You can't do it. You can only do one song at a time, and even that is only one phrase at a time, one note at a time. So we have this wonderful facility of time, which presents us with an event and a hollow, event and a blank. In that blank, we can consciously put something chosen of our own. But it requires us to notice what is going on, a power of observation in the mental field, and say what is going on, and allow the old friends, which are not our old friends at all. So in my first talk, I mentioned that passage from 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Udared Atmanatmanam. It begins like that. See, you can drag yourself down or lift yourself up. What does it mean? It means you can let go of this attention and allow it to spiral downwards. Or you can catch it and move it upwards. Allowing it means we entertain old friends that were there maybe from childhood, 3, 4, 5 years old. Disappointment, anger, doubt, greed, etc., jealousy, and so on. Let them come. These are old friends. Nicely, you say, okay, you're here. There's nothing we can do about it. You arrived. So have a cup of tea. Come if you like. Stay if you can. Go if you must. I have new friends. What about us old friends? No, I do have new friends. And they're better company for me. I'll put in strength, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony, like that. Put it in second after second. In this way, we change the habit level. You cannot change the unconscious level directly. You can only do it by developing the conscious mind, doing it in a certain systematic way, but making it delightful, making it a joy, a kind of sport, a kind of play. Whenever some negative thought comes in, what does it mean by negative? Negative means anything that in the short or long term is bound to give me pain. So Buddha recognizes this. He says, I know your pain. I recognize it. I also know where it comes from. I know the cause of it. The cause of it is there's a felt feeling, a hollow inside, a kind of gap, a blank, and I think I can fill it from the outside. It's called a desire. I want this, means I haven't got it. Plus one, minus one, we were discussing earlier, you won't get anywhere. There must be a kind of shift in your approach. Because the natural thing is, what I haven't got, I'll go and buy, or I'll go and acquire. I'll pursue it. But at some point or other, there must be a realization that says, no, it's not working. I have to use some different formula. What will I have to do? So the cause is desires, a kind of unsettlement in the mind, which says, I'm not fulfilled. So understanding the cause, Buddha, very conveniently, out of compassion, wanting to spread this without any complications, without any abstractions or metaphysics or anything complicated like that. Later his followers put it, but he himself constructed his formula in such a simple way that with a few fingers on one hand he could say 4 noble truths. There is pain, we acknowledge it. I acknowledge your pain, that's why you came to see me. Secondly, I know what the cause is. I know the symptom and I know the cause. Third thing is, there is a remedy. Be optimistic about it. And lastly, fourth, here I'm going to give you 8 medicines. Please take everyone. Please take them and take them daily. Eightfold Path. Okay. Encapsulating every aspect of human life. Right living, right livelihood, right thinking, right concentration, right behavior, all of these kinds of things, right this, right that, 8 of them, designed to do one thing. Why would they be remedies at all? It's because when our attention is projected in a different way, not the normal sort of way, the scattered way, that is designed to fill us with a kind of external remedy. It's an internal revolution. It's a reevaluation of the mind. Turning the mind, as it were, upside down to see that this world is not what we think it is, because why would we have desires in the first place? Not just a felt hollow within, but a valuation of the world that says that all these waves that we consolidated call the universe, that the ancient sages said are evidence of a shaky existence, something that is always changing, something in a state of flux, to use their terminology. Knowing that, we know that that's not where we can find our satisfaction and our remedies. So on 2 hands, he was able to do it very simply, without any complications. Now, there's an additional thing though. Buddhism was in India for, let's say, 1,000 years, was the main worldview, if you will, main religion. But you see, it died from a number of different factors. One factor was that we have to bring in the abstract in a comprehensible way. We have to have a subject for shifting our attention toward, or an object, if you will. We have to have forms. We have to bring out art and culture. We have to stimulate our imagination. We have to rally around the emotions and bring them up to the principles. In a competition between head and heart, the heart will always win. And if the heart is torn toward things that we love and desire on the one side, we have to have a method where we rally this round to match the principles that we have and find out what is this existent thing. And so, without any complications, all the materials being there, we use the advantage of units of seconds where we can put something chosen of our own in that will help to stabilize the mind. Now, if we talk about Sankya's view of the mind and the geography of the mind, we are using for convenience terms the term mind, but let's use the term antakarana, internal instrument. That means we are revaluing its ownership. Instead of saying my mind, we are saying no, it's a mind, is an instrument that belongs to a user. Something independent of the mind, something independent of the instrument. You don't make the mistake with a car or a shoe or a shirt. You say it belongs to me, clear subject-object relationship. Same thing, the body. So When we evaluate this body, we see that it's a changing thing. You must have noticed. Your mirror must have told you. And so we can systematically say, okay, this is made from parts. Evidently, for the use of some independent entity, it is an instrument. And the mind also is an instrument. Let's not say it's my mind. Let's call it the Lord's sitting room, introducing now an imaginative, artistic, creative idea that appeals to our emotions. Not my mind. It's God's office. Put it that way. The Lord's office. Then where does grace come into this? Well, even the bodily functions don't operate without a flow of grace. We have no idea when we put our food in the mouth, we have no idea about its breakdown. It goes into a kind of factory. It's broken down. Various chemical inputs are there and so on. All of that, all working rhythmically. All working like the most well-designed factory we could ever think of, and we're completely unaware of it. All unconscious activity going on. So what is that makes it work? Now that same chapter, the Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, I'm repeating many things from my first talk probably, maybe in a different way. But you see there, it mentions, there is a 9-gated city. What is that? This is the human body. It's echoing the passage from the Kathopanishad. It gives us 11 gates, 11-gated city. Ekadashidvaram, 11-gated city. What are these gates? 7 in the head, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, the mouth. So then we have the organ of generation, the organ of evacuation. Like that, we can compile it as 9 gates. We're going to add a few more to make 11. The navel, where birth came from, and the royal entrance, the royal gateway, top of the head. So all of these gateways are there for what purpose? It's a city, like any city. What will you find there? You'll find highways and byways. You'll find the waste disposal department. You'll find the pneumatic department. You'll find the transport department, transporting goods, useful nutrients and oxygen, and taking away carbon dioxide and waste materials through the lymphatic system. All of that is being done so that there is an indweller of this city who is Ajna, unborn, and whose consciousness is unflickering. Something like a light. You light a candle, first thing you notice is it's never steady. Well, the mind is like that too, yes, but this essential thing is unborn and unchanging. His consciousness is unflickering. It's a steady thing. And it doesn't move because it's steady. It doesn't act, it doesn't move. Its presence is there. And its presence being there, it's being steady. It is called Purusha. Purusha means, derived from 2 terms. Puri means a city, indweller of a city. And Purna meaning fullness. Lest you think that is an imprisoned thing. Something inside the body and it can't escape, poor thing. So no, it is there everywhere. Now when you say that, it is infinite, it is steady, it is unmoving, and yet it is everywhere. You're now using the language of Brahman, the supreme principle, the absolute. Can there be many absolutes? The Sankhya's made that error. They said, okay, there's so many Purushas, every person Purusha. They were generous enough to put everything under one umbrella called nature, but not generous enough to put it for a good reason. That is, if you get enlightenment, we should all get it. So how does that work? So the Vedanta comes and rescues the thing and says, no, 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 no. It is not subject to time and space and all that. It's not an object. And in fact, it is beyond all of that. It transcends all of that, and yet is immanent in it as well. And the immanence goes when the transcendence is discovered. You cannot have the absolute and the relative exactly together. If you have the relative, the absolute is a distant thing. And if you have the absolute, the relative disappears completely. And what is some kind of sample of that? Well, we all go into a deep sleep. In that deep sleep, time goes, space goes. So there's a third world. These three worlds are there. This is what tripartite means. Three worlds. A waking world, a waking state of consciousness. That means an expression of a consciousness that doesn't move, unflickering. It doesn't act, it doesn't profit, but by its presence, everything moves. And so the only thing we can compare it to is something like a remote control. And I mentioned in my first talk on this, just to refresh your memory, and at the risk of boring you, that on Mars we have a robot. If you didn't know any better, supposing the old people, or old people, maybe Hollywood people at some point, thought there are small aliens there with antennae on their heads and so on and so forth, the long faces, big eyes, walking around on Mars, that's their place. And all of a sudden they see this creature with wheels moving along, moving its head like this, making an exploration, digging here, digging there, with kind of eyes. They don't know it's cameras. They think it's a self-operating thing, but it's not. The control comes thousands and thousands of kilometers away at a control room. So there's a funny example that I like to give. Supposing you invite me in and ask me, please sit on a chair. Prior to that, some engineer has made a remote control apparatus so that when I sit on the chair, it activates by remote control a kind of robot that comes with a tray and a teapot and pours the Swami tea. Not knowing what happened in the arrangement like that, I'm puzzled. How can it be like this? How can all this steel come in and do this? My wrong assumption is it must be a self-activated, self-caused, self-motivated thing. No, it's not. I activated it myself. All I did was sit on the chair and all this movement took place. So by remote control, on the basis that this entity, like an emperor, sits in a kingdom, in an empire, and because of its presence, all the other offices, all the other subsidiary activities, they all work. Food is digested, and we're able to go to the headquarters and see the decision-making processes going on there. Because from the Sankhya point of view, the parts of this internal instrument will be the sense organs. When the eyes closed, they come out. When they come out and the eyes are closed and the consciousness shifts a little bit, we call this dream. Dream is sleep plus memory. And then when that goes off, we go into a deep sleep. From the brain functioning point of view, it happens 4 or 5 times a night. Followed a cycle of dreaming or rapid eye movement physiologically, and then going into another state. You can measure the brain waves like this, deep sleep, a pattern, a cycle repeating some 4 or 5 times a night. So that's the brain is doing this not independently. It's doing it because there is this indweller of this city, 11-gated city, that by its presence everything is moving. Now, if that's happening and we're unaware of it, where should our attention be pitched? See, that reality is here. Why don't we know it? Our attention is pitched somewhere else. We take the attention and pitch it in this way, then a certain discovery comes, and this is also called grace. At the moment, the grace doesn't flow in a certain way. It flows, of course, but we're unaware of it because we take it for granted. We take it for granted the sun shines. We take it for granted that there are moon cycles. We take it for granted that there will be breakfast in the morning. We take it for granted that air is supplied. We're completely unaware of it. We simply take advantage of the breathing, and we don't even think about it. And yet, can we not thank the operator of this at least once? A sense of thankfulness. Can we not pause a little bit and register the thankfulness, a gratitude in such a way that we get an internal joyful shift? And that becomes fulfilling. Given the choice of shifting our attention, shifting the internal part of us, if you will, that internal aspect of us, shifting it up into the topmost gear of joy versus spiraling downwards. You are your own best friend, your own worst enemy, says the Gita. And it says you can raise yourself by yourself or lower yourself by yourself. You think the other person is your enemy? No, you yourself are it. You have to take the resolve. And when you start noticing the beginning of a downward spiral, you don't wait until it reaches the bottom. You catch it and use the interval of a second to raise it up again, not just with one time, but all the way up to its maximum, making an internal shift of joy in you. That's a much better thing, isn't it? And so we take this internal instrument, this aspect of it, with these various parts, starting with the internal organs as part of this internal instrument. Because you see, you can, in Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga up front, he tells us about this. And he says that you're a sleeping person, you can open the eyelid, the eyes will beam out at you, but nobody will see. It requires attention attached to it. So all the internal instruments are there playing in the dream and playing your imagination. You think of an elephant, you see an elephant in the zoo, and then you say, I saw an elephant in the zoo. An elephant will appear, a picture of it, a form of it, an image in your so-called mind. It's not that you stuffed a whole elephant in there. So there's a subtle form of it. So we know that there is a gross form, and we know that there is a name. And when we use the name, the form gets replicated internally. And then another part will be a reception faculty, which we literally call manasa. First thing is called indriyas. Second thing is manasa. That is the rest of the mind bar the executive faculty, including the unconscious mind, emotions, and all these things are there, but non-discriminating, simply accepting it, registering it, recalling it, putting into the archives, recalling as we want, like a kind of library. But what is making the executive decision, this we call buddhi, the intellect. When we talk about Buddha, it means one of enlightened intellect. The intellect seems to have a light and intelligence of its own, but it's borrowed. Borrowed from where? Borrowed from pure consciousness. And the whole assembly is given a label I. But the I is only there for passport purposes. The I is only there to say, all of this has to be registered in some way. I can put a stamp on it to make me an individual so I can relate to other individuals and so on. It's not that you can leave the philosophy behind. The practical philosophy says, I am really not the actor-prophet complex. I'm not the profiteer, I'm not the actor. I am that doesn't move, that is unchanging, that steady thing. That is pure consciousness itself, characterized by Sat, existence itself. It doesn't change. It's always there. It was always there. It will always be there. Unchanged. It'll be there. Chit, consciousness. Consciousness itself. Not a quality. It itself is consciousness. And then bliss, ananda. The Tiriya Upanishad shifts a little bit of satyam, jnanam and anantam. but it equates to the same thing. Now, if we want to explain the world, if we want to explain the psyche, if we want to explain the body, if we want to explain all the phenomena in the universe, we have to make sure that if there's a foundation and we cannot comprehend it, when we put in time and space and causation, we can see that the relative and the absolute seem to be mixed up. We don't see anything different, we see something similar. And so we all want to live. Why? Our nature is existence. We all want to think and to evaluate and appreciate on different levels. For example, art and culture, or science and mathematics. We all want to try and understand things. We all want, and it comes out in the cognition. I'm aware. Because our nature is consciousness. It's not an accident. When you add time and space, it comes out. And we all wish to be happy, and hopefully we all have a sense of humor. Our nature is bliss. We are essentially blissful entities. But what's in the way of it? What's in the way of it is our wrong valuation of the world. We're taking a movie consisting of individual units of pictures run at a certain velocity so that the eye can catch it and interpret it as a continuum. And it's playing a good, nice trick on us, challenging us. Can you slow this down? Can you make it silent? Can you see the still pictures? Can you see the projector? Can you see the projectionist? Can you see the whole thing, the whole totality? So that is where we need to steer our attention and our consciousness. So we are under some pressures from time to time where things come into the mind, and we know that we can shift our attention at any given moment. The famous example I always give. So two people having an argument in a domestic environment, and there's a knock on the door and a visitor comes. The argument is dropped and tea and biscuits come out. So we know that we can shift it. We know that if we point something else out, which is entertaining. Now behind it all is a big series of obstacles. And one big obstacle is this actor-prophet complex that we call I. In other words, we have identified with the instrumentation. How to get out of that? We revalue it. And we fill the mind up with such spiraling joy that we're able to take away all self-centeredness away. Because spiraling the mind upwards requires us not to be egocentric, not to focus on me. Two people talking in the corner. Oh, they must be talking about me. See? No, they're talking about the snowfall in the morning or whatever it is. So we make this assumption. Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras calls this, we translate it as verbal delusion. We imagine something, we superimpose an idea on something, and we make a misunderstanding, misinterpretation. We're doing it all the time. So this is in the realm of things that have to be controlled. Two ways of controlling this. One way is the theistic way and say, I am a child. I acknowledge my individuality. Difficult to get out of the sense of individuality. I feel embodied. Let me accept it. And then let me create then an ideal, a nearest possible reading of the absolute to the human mind as an example of a model of perfection, something like a Jesus or a Buddha. Take that, worship that, mobilize my feelings toward that. As soon as I do that, what becomes of my poor me? I forget it. It becomes all about the other. The benefit of love is you don't have to discipline or suppress anything or repress anything. You simply transfer your emotions. You elevate them in a different way. And that becomes beautiful, sweet, delightful. Another way would be to see that everything really is an expression of divine grace flowing through. Shvetashvatara Upanishad says it in other places, through 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, means all eyes, all limbs, all of the so-called observed fragments, and see this grace flowing through them. And so the quotation the other night was about boats. The wind of divine grace is always blowing. We have to just set our sail and catch it. But you see, is it easy? I pointed out, is it easy to set the sail? Anybody who's tried sailing will know you have to haul the mast up, you have to attach the sail, you have to put the ropes on without everything getting entangled. And there's a lot of things. But compared to the actual action of sailing, it's a minimum thing. The wind does the lion's share. And the difficult thing is to let go. So what is this egoism and what is its effect? Its effect is pain. Its effect is shriveling because of lack of generosity of spirit, instead of making this ego an open channel for divine grace to flow to everyone. So, like a flower. See, a flower opens up, it's happy to share its color, its perfume, its fragrance. It's happy to act as a landing pad for insects to come and take its pollen. It's happy to not to discriminate against anybody and said, you didn't do anything good today, you never watered me, you never gave me fertilizer, I'll withhold my color from you, I'll shrink. No, it faces the sun, glorious sun, just as we should face that, and shares itself generously with everyone. But egoism is a shrinking thing. It's like a flower curling up, withering to the point of being almost lifeless. So this is one of the obstacles to this flow of divine grace. You might say that the grace of the RTE broadcast is always flowing. We just have to catch the wavelength with our attention. We learn to do that. So I will have repeated many things probably from my original talk. And so what I intended to be part 2, I haven't really done it, but I won't do a part 3. I think you get the idea. There's a beautiful passage in the Mundaka Upanishad which says that Purusha is all this. This Purusha, this indwellerity, is actually all of this. All that you find here in theistic terms is God alone. And what we see as individualities is seemingly fragmented divinity. When we notice it, our behavior changes. When we notice it, our spirit of generosity changes. You can do 2 things with light. You can make it into a spotlight on yourself, or you can be like a beaming lantern or a beaming lighthouse, beaming its light for the benefit of everyone. The choice is yours. You can raise yourself up or lower yourself down. You can spiral down or spiral up. And we need 1,000 tools to do it, such as music, art, culture, imagination. We need to rally the emotions around. We need to take advantage of this gift of an opportunity called time and put it in, fill it in. A blank check, never been used, put something useful in it, second by second by second, until the whole of the unconscious mind becomes saturated with holiness, divinity, truth, knowledge, and understanding. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yes, okay, all right, good, good,
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank
Swamiji, have a good evening.
And you, and you.
Thank you, Swamiji.